The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the familiar hum of translation devices as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered for the quarterly military demonstration. Admiral Zephyra of the Kethtar Empire adjusted her ceremonial battle cloak, its iridescent scales catching the artificial light. Around her, beings of every conceivable form filled the massive amphitheater that orbited the neutral system of Nexus Prime. Today was special. Today, the newest member species would present their contribution to the galaxy's collective defense against the ever-present threat of the Void Hunters, ancient machines that swept through star systems, consuming everything in their path. The humans approach, announced Chancellor Vex Tai, his crystalline form resonating with barely contained amusement. Perhaps we shall finally see what this primitive species has to offer. Captain Elena Vasquez stepped onto the presentation platform, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate regalia surrounding her. Behind her, a holographic display materialized, showing what appeared to be an unremarkable vessel. It was roughly cylindrical, about 2 kilometers in length, with a dull gray hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Honored Council," Elena began, her voice steady despite the weight of 10,000 eyes upon her. "Humanity presents the UES Persistence, our contribution to galactic defense." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. The ship looked ordinary, primitive, even. Where were the energy wings that could slice through dimensions? Where were the quantum displacement drives that allowed instantaneous positioning? Where were the reality-warping weapons that characterized modern warfare? Commander Thexara of the Velocity Corps, whose own ships could cross galaxies in mere hours, leaned forward in his hover throne. "Human," he called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "What is the maximum velocity of this craft?" Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The Persistence achieves approximately 12% of light speed in normal space." The chamber erupted. Laughter, gasps of disbelief, and insulted chittering filled the air. 12%? The slowest ship in the galactic fleet could manage 60%, and that was considered obsolete technology. "Surely there is a mistake," declared Admiral Zephyra, rising from her seat. "Our intelligence suggests your species has mastered nuclear fusion and basic gravity manipulation. Even with such primitive technology, you should achieve at least 30% light speed." "The specifications are correct," Elena replied, her voice growing colder. "The Persistence is designed for different priorities." "Different priorities?" Lord Commander Krixtal's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this information. "In an age where the Void Hunters can appear anywhere, strike with the force of dying stars, and vanish before conventional weapons can even acquire targeting locks, you present us with a ship that moves like a drifting asteroid?" Elena activated the next phase of her presentation. Technical specifications scrolled across the holographic display, but they only seemed to confirm the Council's worst suspicions. The ship's weapons were kinetic, simple projectiles accelerated to high velocity. No energy manipulation, no exotic matter conversion, no temporal displacement capabilities. "The primary armament," Elena continued, "consists of 16 railgun batteries, each capable of accelerating a tungsten carbide projectile to 98% light speed." More laughter. Senator Quill Nex of the Trade Federation, whose own merchant vessels carried defensive systems more advanced than what the humans were presenting, shook his crystalline head in dismay. "You bring us Stone Age technology wrapped in metal, and expect us to take this seriously? The defensive systems," Elena pressed on, "utilize reactive armor plating with a titanium graphene composite hull, designed to withstand sustained bombardment." "Reactive armor?" Admiral Zephyra's voice rose in incredulous pitch. "We abandoned such primitive concepts 3 millennia ago. Modern warfare transcends physical barriers entirely. The Void Hunters exist partially outside normal spacetime. Your projectiles would pass harmlessly through them." Elena stood silent for a moment, letting the mockery wash over her. When she finally spoke, her words cut through the noise like a blade. "The Persistence has been in active service for 15 years. It has engaged Void Hunter formations on 17 separate occasions." The laughter died abruptly. Chancellor Vex Tai's crystalline form flickered as he processed this claim. "Impossible. No single vessel has ever survived more than one encounter with the Hunters. Our combined fleets require overwhelming numerical superiority just to drive them off. Yet here I stand." Elena said simply. Elaborate fabrication, scoffed Commander Thexara. Your species is new to the galactic community. Perhaps you mistake encounters with space debris or rogue asteroids for actual hunter formations. Elena's eyes flashed dangerously. In our first engagement, at the Proxima Centauri system, the Persistence faced a hunter pack of 12 vessels. The engagement lasted 4 hours and 37 minutes. Enemy casualties. Total. Human casualties. 0. The chamber fell into stunned silence. A kill ratio of 12-0 against the Void Hunters was not just impressive, it was theoretically impossible. The Hunters were ancient intelligences in mechanical bodies that had been perfecting the art of destruction since before most of the Council species had achieved spaceflight. You claim to have destroyed 12 Hunter vessels with kinetic projectiles? Lord Commander, Krixtal's cybernetics were working overtime, running probability calculations. Our most advanced quantum torpedoes require focused fire from entire battle groups to achieve a single confirmed kill. The Hunter's greatest weakness, Elena explained, is their overconfidence in their technological superiority. They exist partially in hyperspace to avoid conventional energy weapons, but they maintain a physical presence in normal space to interact with matter, to feed, to destroy, to harvest resources. She paused, watching as understanding began to dawn on some of the more tactically minded council members. Kinetic projectiles don't rely on energy fields that can be dispersed or deflected. They don't use exotic particles that can be nullified by hunter countermeasures. A tungsten carbide slug moving at near light speed carries momentum that exists entirely in normal space. When it impacts a target, the laws of physics become unforgiving. Admiral Zephyra's scales rippled with growing unease. But their speed advantage. How does such a slow vessel even engage targets that move like living thoughts? Patience, Elena said. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. Humans have always excelled at patience. The holographic display shifted to show battle recordings. The footage was grainy, taken from long-range sensors, but it clearly showed the distinctive energy signatures of Void Hunter vessels. They moved in their characteristic pattern, random quantum jumps that made them impossible to predict or intercept. Traditional fleet tactics assume you need to be faster than your enemy to engage them effectively, Elena continued. But speed is only one variable in the tactical equation. Predictability is another. The recording showed the Persistence hanging motionless in space as hunter vessels materialized around it in seemingly random positions. The human ship made no attempt to pursue or evade. The hunters attack in waves, testing defenses before committing to full assault. They believe their speed makes them untouchable. They believe their exotic weaponry makes them invincible. They believe their age gives them wisdom. On screen, the first hunter vessel began its attack run. Energy lances that could melt through conventional armor struck the Persistence's hull, creating brilliant flashes but seemingly causing no significant damage. They are wrong on all counts. As the hunter vessel closed to what it presumably considered optimal firing range, the Persistence finally moved. Not quickly. The ship's rotation was almost leisurely by galactic combat standards, but the timing was perfect. A single railgun discharged, sending its projectile on an intercept course that would meet the hunter vessel exactly where its momentum would carry it. The impact was catastrophic. The hunter vessel, designed to phase through energy attacks, had no defense against a physical projectile that existed purely in normal space. The tungsten carbide slug passed through the ship's hull like paper, and the kinetic energy transfer tore the entire vessel apart in an expanding cloud of debris. Impossible, whispered Senator Quilnex. You calculated that trajectory before the hunter even began its attack run. Humans have been throwing projectiles at moving targets for over 2 million years, Elena replied. We've gotten rather good at it. The recording continued. Hunter after hunter fell to the same basic principle. Their own speed and momentum used against them by projectiles fired not at where they were, but where they would be. The Persistence never moved faster than necessary, never wasted energy on dramatic maneuvers. It simply waited, calculated, and fired. This is a single engagement against a small patrol, protested Commander Thexara. A full hunter fleet would overwhelm any single vessel, regardless of tactical innovation. You're correct, Elena agreed. Which is why the Persistence is not alone. The holographic display expanded, revealing the fuller scope of humanity's contribution to galactic defense. Scattered throughout human space, dozens of ships, identical to the Persistence, maintained silent vigil. They were stationed not at strategic locations or resource-rich systems, but at seemingly random points that made no tactical sense to conventional military thinking. The Hunter Network, Elena explained, operates on principles we've observed across 17 engagements. They're not random raiders, they're systematic. They probe, they test, they learn, but they've never encountered an enemy that treats speed as a liability rather than an asset. Lord Commander Krixtal's cybernetic implants sparked as he processed the implications. You're creating a web, a network of intercept points based on Hunter movement patterns. The Persistence-class vessels are designed around a simple principle. Deny the enemy the initiative. Don't chase them where they want to go. Force them to come to where you want them to be. The mockery that had filled the chamber was transforming into something else entirely. Unease. Fear, perhaps. These humans had been dismissed as primitives, but they were describing a strategic philosophy that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. "Show us the Tau Ceti engagement," demanded Admiral Zafira. Her scales had shifted to the deep purple that indicated extreme agitation. Elena hesitated for a moment. The Tau Ceti engagement is classified at the highest levels. However, she touched a control on her wrist device. "I've been authorized to share limited footage." The new recording made the previous battle look like a training exercise. Hundreds of Hunter vessels swarmed through space around a human colony world, their exotic weapons tearing through conventional defenses like they were made of paper. The colonial fleet was being systematically destroyed, outmatched in every conventional measure of combat effectiveness. Then the Persistence arrived, but this time, it wasn't alone. 3 sister ships emerged from hyperspace at precisely calculated intervals, forming a geometric pattern that seemed to make no tactical sense. They were too far apart to provide mutual support, too slow to intercept the Hunter formations, too few to make any meaningful difference against such overwhelming numbers. The Hunters, recognizing easy prey, converged on the human vessels with typical efficiency. It should have been a massacre. Instead, it became a demonstration of mathematics made manifest. The first Hunter formation to engage found itself caught in a crossfire of kinetic projectiles that seemed to emerge from empty space. The human ships hadn't fired at the attacking vessels. They had fired at precise points in space, calculating not just where the Hunters would be, but where they would go when they tried to evade. Hunter vessels began dying in clusters as their own evasive maneuvers carried them directly into projectile paths calculated hours in advance. The 4 human ships moved in perfect coordination, their slow, deliberate rotations creating overlapping fields of fire that turned Hunter speed from an advantage into a death trap. The engagement lasted 14 hours. Elena reported as the recording showed Hunter vessel after Hunter vessel torn apart by kinetic impacts. Enemy casualties, 467 confirmed kills. Human casualties, superficial hull damage to 1 vessel. The chamber had fallen completely silent. The implications were staggering. Not only had the humans achieved impossible kill ratios against the galaxy's most feared enemy, they had done so using technology that most council members considered obsolete. Chancellor Vextai's crystalline form pulsed with an unreadable pattern. "How many of these vessels do you possess?" "That information is classified," Elena replied. "But I can tell you that the Persistence was the prototype. She was built to test a theory. Every human world now has at least 1 guardian." "Guardian," repeated Admiral Zafira slowly. "Not defender, not patrol vessel. Guardian. The distinction is important," Elena confirmed. "A defender reacts to threats. A guardian ensures that threats never have the opportunity to fully manifest." The recording shifted to show long-range sensor data from human space. To most observers, the scattered positions of human vessels seemed random, even wasteful. But as the display highlighted known Hunter incursion patterns from the past century, a different picture emerged. Every major invasion route was covered. Every known gathering point was monitored. Every escape vector was blocked. The humans hadn't just built ships. They had built a cage that spanned light years, designed to trap an enemy that could move faster than thought. "You're not just defending yourselves," realized Lord Commander Krixtal. "You're protecting all of us." "The Hunter threat doesn't recognize species boundaries," Elena said simply. "They consume everything in their path. If they break through in human space, they'll reach Kethtar space within decades, Velocity Core territory within a century, the entire galactic rim within a millennium." She gestured to the star charts, showing the inexorable spread of hunter activity over the past 10,000 years. Every species in this chamber has lost worlds to them. Every fleet that has engaged them has suffered catastrophic losses. The traditional approach, building faster ships with more exotic weapons, has been failing for longer than some of your civilizations have existed. So you built slower ships, said Senator Quill Nex, his voice filled with something approaching awe. We built patient ships, Elena corrected. Ships that wait, ships that watch, ships that turn the enemy's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The presentation was drawing to a close, but the implications were just beginning to sink in. These humans, dismissed as primitives just hours ago, had apparently solved a military problem that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The Persistence and her sister ships represent a new paradigm in galactic defense, Elena concluded. Not because of advanced technology, but because of advanced thinking. We invite the Council to observe our methods, to learn from our experience, and to consider how patience might serve where speed has failed. As the holographic display faded, the chamber remained silent. The mockery that had greeted humanity's presentation had transformed into something else entirely. A recognition that sometimes the most profound innovations came not from building something faster, stronger, or more complex, but from building something different. Admiral Zafira was the first to speak, her voice carefully controlled. Captain Vasquez, humanity's application for full council membership and military cooperation will require extensive review. Elena nodded formally. Of course, Admiral. Take all the time you need. She paused at the edge of the platform, then added with the slightest hint of a smile. But perhaps not too much time. The hunters are still out there, and they're learning too. As the human captain left the chamber, the council members sat in uncomfortable silence, each grappling with the same unsettling realization. They had just witnessed either the most sophisticated military deception in galactic history, or the emergence of a species that understood warfare in ways that challenged every accepted principle of modern combat. The truth, they would soon discover, was far more disturbing than either possibility. 3 months after Captain Vasquez's presentation, the Galactic Council remained divided. The recordings were undeniably authentic. Their own sensor networks had confirmed the impossibly successful engagements, yet the implications were so profound that many council members simply refused to accept them. Admiral Zafira stood in the command center of the Kethtar flagship Stellar Dominion, watching long-range sensors track a formation of human vessels conducting what they called a routine patrol. The ships moved with the same deliberate slowness that had prompted so much mockery, following patrol routes that seemed to ignore every principle of strategic positioning. Their bait, declared Commander Thexara, his own vessel maintaining position alongside the Kethtar flagship. No military force would deploy assets so carelessly unless they intended to draw enemy attention. Perhaps, Admiral Zafira replied, though her tone suggested doubt. Or perhaps we simply don't understand their strategy. The joint observation mission had been Chancellor Vextai's idea. Rather than endlessly debate the human claims, they would observe human operations firsthand. 3 of the galaxy's most advanced military vessels had been assigned to shadow human patrols, equipped with the finest sensor arrays and tactical analysis systems available. For 3 months, they had watched the humans do nothing. The human ships followed their predetermined routes with mechanical precision. They responded to routine communications. They conducted maintenance operations. But they showed no signs of the tactical brilliance that Captain Vasquez had demonstrated. If anything, they appeared to be following a pattern so rigid it bordered on stupidity. Contact, announced the Kethtar sensor operator, her voice cutting through Admiral Zafira's contemplation. Multiple hyperspace distortions detected, bearing 27 Mark IV. Energy signatures are consistent with... Oh no. The main display filled with the distinctive reading that had terrified galactic civilization for millennia. Void hunter vessels were materializing throughout the system, their impossible geometries twisting space itself as they translated from hyperspace to normal space. 12 vessels, reported the sensor operator, her voice tight with fear. No. 15. 20. They're still arriving. Admiral Zafira felt her scales shift to combat colors automatically. A hunter pack of this size could devastate an entire star system before reinforcements could arrive. Signal the fleet. All vessels prepare for immediate withdrawal. Belay that order, came an unexpected voice from the communications array. Captain Maria Santos, of the human vessel, Resolution, appeared on the holographic display, her expression calm despite the approaching catastrophe. Galactic vessels, maintain current position, do not attempt to engage or retreat. Captain Santos, Admiral Zafira said, forcing her voice to remain level. You have 23 Void Hunter vessels converging on this position. Your single ship cannot possibly. With respect, Admiral, Captain Santos interrupted. You're here to observe. Please observe. The human captain's casual dismissal of overwhelming odds would have been infuriating under normal circumstances, but as Admiral Zafira watched the tactical display, she began to notice something that made her combat instincts scream warnings. The hunters were not moving randomly. Their approach vectors, while individually unpredictable, were collectively forming a pattern. They were surrounding not just the human ship, but the entire volume of space where all 4 vessels were operating. They're hurting us, she realized with growing horror. The hunters aren't just attacking, they're ensuring we can't escape. Commander Thexara's vessel began powering up its displacement drives. All ships, emergency quantum jump on my mark. Negative, Captain Santos said firmly. Do not attempt hyperspace transit. The hunters have deployed interdiction fields. Any jump attempt will result in catastrophic dimensional shear. As if to prove her point, the long-range sensors detected the distinctive energy signatures of hunter interdiction technology. The invisible fields would turn any hyperspace jump into a death sentence, trapping vessels between dimensions until they were torn apart by conflicting gravitational forces. Then we're trapped, Admiral Zafira said, the tactical reality crushing down on her like a physical weight. 4 ships against 23 hunters, with no possibility of retreat or reinforcement. Yes, Captain Santos agreed, and incredibly, she was smiling. Perfect conditions for a field demonstration. The Resolution began to move, but not in any way that made tactical sense. Instead of turning to face the approaching hunters or positioning itself for optimal weapons deployment, the human ship simply rotated slowly on its axis, like a lighthouse beacon scanning the horizon. What is she doing? Demanded Commander Thexara. The hunters will be in weapons range in 12 minutes. Why isn't she maneuvering for combat? Because she doesn't need to, Admiral Zafira whispered, a terrible understanding beginning to dawn. Look at the positioning. The tactical display showed the approaching hunter vessels and their projected intercept courses. To any conventional tactical analysis, the situation was hopeless. The hunters had overwhelming numerical superiority and were approaching from multiple vectors that would prevent concentrated defensive fire. But as Admiral Zafira studied the projection more carefully, she began to see something else. The hunters were moving in their characteristic pattern, random quantum jumps that made them impossible to predict or intercept. But the jumps weren't truly random. They were constrained by physics, by their own momentum, by the interdiction fields they had deployed to trap their prey. She's calculating, Admiral Zafira breathed. She's calculating all of it. The Resolution's rotation continued, and now the Admiral could see that it wasn't random either. The human ship was positioning itself to create specific firing solutions, not at where the hunters were, but at where they could be, given the constraints of physics and their own tactical doctrine. Impossible, protested Commander Thexara. No organic mind can process that many variables. The quantum calculations alone would require our most advanced tactical computers. Then perhaps, Admiral Zafira said slowly, we've been thinking about this wrong. Captain Santos's voice filled the communication channel again, calm and professional. Galactic vessels, you're about to witness a standard hunter engagement. Please record all sensor data for later analysis. Combat initiation in 4 minutes, 30 seconds. How can she possibly know the exact timing? Demanded the Kethtar sensor operator. Admiral Zafira was beginning to understand, and the realization filled her with a mixture of awe and terror. Because the hunters are predictable. They think they're random, but they're following patterns, ancient patterns, and the humans have been studying those patterns for years. The hunter formation began its final approach, individual vessels performing their characteristic evasive jumps. To anyone watching, it would seem like chaos. 23 ships appearing and disappearing across the battlefield in seemingly random positions, but the Resolution tracked them all. The first hunter vessel materialized directly in front of the human ship's main battery, moving at tremendous speed on what should have been an unpredictable vector. The railgun fired, sending its kinetic projectile on an intercept course that seemed impossible. The tungsten carbide slug caught the hunter vessel amidships, the kinetic energy transfer ripping through armor that had withstood the combined firepower of entire galactic fleets. The ancient machine died instantly, its exotic matter containment failing in a cascade of exotic energy. One down, Captain Santos reported calmly. 22 remaining. The second hunter vessel appeared behind the Resolution, already firing its reality-warping weapons at what should have been the human ship's vulnerable rear section. But the Resolution had already begun its rotation, and the exotic energy beams struck layered armor designed specifically to absorb and dissipate such attacks. The return shot was already in flight before the hunter's weapon stopped firing. Another kinetic kill, another impossible intercept of a target moving faster than thought. How? Commander Thexara's voice was almost a whisper. How is she hitting targets that move through quantum space? They don't move through quantum space. Admiral Zafira realized. They move to quantum space, then back to normal space. But they have to obey physics during the transition. And physics is predictable. The battle continued with mechanical precision. Hunter after hunter materialized in exactly the position where a kinetic projectile was waiting. Their speed, their unpredictability, their technological superiority, none of it mattered against an enemy that had reduced their tactical doctrine to mathematical certainties. 15 down, Captain Santos reported. 8 remaining, but something was changing. The surviving hunters were adapting their approach, their quantum jumps becoming more erratic as their tactical AI systems attempted to break the pattern that was getting them killed. They're learning, observed the Kethtar sensor operator. Yes, Captain Santos agreed. They always do. That's why we never use the same tactical approach twice. Admiral Zafira watched in fascination as the Resolution's tactics shifted. Instead of waiting for the hunters to approach, the human ship began firing projectiles at seemingly empty space. The kinetic slugs disappeared into the void, traveling on trajectories that made no apparent sense. Then the remaining hunter vessels began to die. Each time a hunter attempted to quantum jump to a new attack position, it materialized directly into the path of a projectile that had been fired minutes earlier. The humans weren't just predicting where the hunters would be, they were predicting where the hunters would try to go when their original tactics failed. 7 down, Captain Santos reported. 1 remaining. The last hunter vessel had stopped moving entirely, hanging in space as its ancient AI systems apparently struggled to find a tactical solution that wouldn't result in immediate destruction. For long minutes, predator and prey faced each other across the void. It's trying to calculate a safe jump vector, Admiral Zafira realized. But every possibility leads to an intercept. The humans have created a mathematical cage, whispered Commander Thexara. They've reduced the entire battlefield to a computational problem. The final hunter vessel made its decision. Instead of attempting another quantum jump, it charged directly at the Resolution, accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the human defenses through sheer kinetic force. The Resolution didn't move to evade. It didn't even rotate to bring additional weapons to bear. Captain Santos simply fired one last kinetic projectile, perfectly timed to intercept a target moving in a straight line at predictable velocity. The collision was catastrophic. The hunter vessel, designed to phase through conventional attacks, had no defense against a head-on kinetic impact. Both the ancient machine and the tungsten carbide projectile were annihilated in a brief flash of released energy. All hostile vessels destroyed, Captain Santos reported with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the engagement. Galactic vessels, you are free to resume normal operations. The communication channel fell silent. Admiral Zafira stared at her tactical display, trying to process what she had just witnessed. A single human vessel had destroyed 23 void hunters without sustaining any significant damage. It had done so using weapons technology that most of the galaxy considered obsolete, and tactical principles that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. Admiral, her sensor operator said quietly, I'm detecting additional contacts. The display updated to show new vessels emerging from hyperspace throughout the system. Not hunters, human ships, arriving with perfect timing to provide support that was no longer needed. The endurance, determination, steadfast, and vigilance, Captain Santos reported. Standard response protocol for Class 5 hunter incursions. Class 5? Admiral Zafira found her voice. You classified 23 hunter vessels as Class 5? Moderate threat level, Captain Santos confirmed. Class 1 would be a single scout. Class 10 would be a full hunter fleet. We've developed countermeasures for each classification level. Commander Thexara's voice came across the communication channel, shaky with something that might have been fear. Captain Santos, how long have you been studying the hunters? Actively? About 40 years. But we've been preparing for them much longer than that. Preparing how? Captain Santos paused, as if considering how much to reveal. Commander, do you know why humans developed such an affinity for predictive mathematics? Why our species became so skilled at calculating trajectories and intercept courses? I know. Because for most of our evolutionary history, we were prey. We survived by learning to predict the behavior of things that wanted to kill us. We became very, very good at it. Admiral Zephyra felt her scales shift to colors she didn't recognize. The implications were staggering. You're saying your entire species evolved to fight the hunters? Not specifically, but we evolved to fight ancient predators that were faster, stronger, and more dangerous than we were. The hunters are just larger predators. The human reinforcement vessels had taken up patrol positions throughout the system, their movements displaying the same deliberate precision that Admiral Zephyra was beginning to recognize as tactical genius disguised as methodical routine. Admiral, Captain Santos continued, your observation mission has provided valuable data on galactic tactical doctrine. We'd like to invite your vessels to observe our response to a Class 7 incursion next week. Class 7? Approximately 60 hunter vessels. Should provide a more comprehensive demonstration of human capabilities. Admiral Zephyra realized her mouth had fallen open. You're hunting them. The hunters. You're actively seeking them out. The best defense, Captain Santos said with quiet certainty, is a patient offense. The hunters have been apex predators for millions of years. It's time they learned what it feels like to be prey. As the human vessels settled into their patrol routes, Admiral Zephyra began to understand the true scope of what she had witnessed. This wasn't just a successful military engagement. It was evidence of a fundamental shift in the galactic balance of power. Humanity hadn't just developed better weapons or faster ships. They had developed something far more dangerous, a complete understanding of their enemy's psychology, tactics, and limitations. They had turned warfare into applied mathematics, and mathematics was always on the side of the patient species that took the time to understand the equation. Commander Thexara, Admiral Zephyra said quietly, signal the fleet. We're returning to Council space immediately. Yes, Admiral. Shall I include a preliminary report on human capabilities? Admiral Zephyra watched the human ships continuing their seemingly routine patrol, now understanding that every movement was part of a vast strategic calculation that spanned star systems and decades. Tell the Council, she said slowly, that we need to convene an emergency session, and tell them that everything we thought we knew about warfare is wrong. As her flagship began its journey back to Council space, Admiral Zephyra couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed the dawn of a new age. The galaxy had spent millennia developing faster ships and more exotic weapons to fight an enemy that was itself obsessed with speed and exotic technology. The humans had taken a different approach. They had built slower ships with simpler weapons, then used time itself as their greatest tactical asset. They had turned patience into a weapon more devastating than any energy beam or quantum torpedo. The Void Hunters, ancient and terrible as they were, had finally encountered a species that understood something they had forgotten in their millions of years of dominance. The most dangerous predators were often the ones that looked harmless until it was too late to escape. And now, those predators were no longer hunting individual ships or defending isolated systems. They were methodically, patiently, systematically hunting the hunters themselves. The galaxy, Admiral Zephyra realized, was about to change forever. 6 months after the field demonstration, emergency klaxons wailed through the Galactic Council headquarters. Chancellor Vextai materialized in the crisis center, his crystalline form flickering with patterns of extreme agitation as he reviewed the incoming reports. How many? He demanded. 17 systems, Admiral Zephyra reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. The Andromeda sector, the Spiral Arms, the Outer Rim territories, all going dark simultaneously. Hunter fleet, massive beyond anything in recorded history. Our deep space monitors detected over 3,000 vessels before the sensor networks were destroyed. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with red indicators spreading like an infection across the outer territories. Each indicator represented the loss of contact with an entire star system. Millions of lives, billions of years of civilization. Simply gone. They're not raiding, Lord Commander Crixtal observed, his cybernetic implants sparking as they processed the tactical data. This is systematic extermination. They're trying to clear entire sectors. It's coordinated across multiple galactic arms, added Senator Quillnex. The attack vectors suggest they've been planning this for centuries, maybe millennia. Chancellor Vextai's form pulsed with desperate calculation. Fleet status? The 7th Battle Group is 6 days away from the nearest incursion point. The 3rd and 5th fleets could converge on the Andromeda sector in 10 days. Admiral Zephyra paused, her scales shifting to the deep purple of defeat. But the projections are grim. The tactical computer's analysis appeared on the display, and the numbers told a story that every being in the room understood without explanation. The combined galactic fleets, even fighting with perfect coordination, had less than a 12% chance of stopping the Hunter advance. Most of the computer models showed complete galactic conquest within 50 years. What about the humans? Asked Lord Commander Crixtal. Human space appears to be unaffected, Admiral Zephyra replied carefully. Our long-range sensors show normal activity in all human systems. They're probably next on the Hunter target list, Senator Quillnex said. Or perhaps the Hunters are saving the newest member species for last. Chancellor Vextai made a decision that went against every instinct he possessed. Send an emergency communication to Earth. Request immediate assistance under the Mutual Defense Accords. Chancellor, Admiral Zephyra protested. With respect, we've seen human capabilities against small Hunter formations, but this is 3,000 vessels. Even if their tactics are as effective as they claim, they can't possibly field enough ships to make a significant difference. Perhaps not, the Chancellor agreed, but they understand the enemy in ways we do not. And at this point, unconventional thinking may be our only hope. The communication to Earth was transmitted on emergency priority channels, compressed into quantum bursts that would reach human space within hours. The council members settled in to wait, each contemplating the possibility that they were witnessing the final days of galactic civilization. The response came faster than anyone expected. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on the holographic display, her image transmitted directly from Earth's orbital defense platform. Behind her, the chamber could see the familiar dull gray hull of a Persistence-class vessel. Chancellor Vextai, she said without preamble. We've been monitoring the Hunter mobilization for the past 18 months. Our response is already in motion. 18 months? Admiral Zephyra leaned forward. You knew this was coming. Hunter behavioral patterns are remarkably consistent once you understand their decision-making algorithms. A buildup of this magnitude was predictable based on their previous expansion cycles. Decision-making algorithms? Lord Commander Crixtal's cybernetics word. You're saying the Hunters are programmed? In a sense, they're ancient artificial intelligences, but they're still bound by their original programming parameters. They optimize for efficiency, minimize resource expenditure, and follow predictable tactical doctrines. Elena paused. Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They can't truly adapt, because adaptation would require them to abandon the optimization routines that make them effective. Chancellor Vextai felt something that might have been hope flickering in his crystalline core. Captain, what kind of response have you prepared? We call it the long game, Elena replied. Human fleets are already in position at strategic intercept points throughout the affected sectors. The Hunter advance will be contained. The display shifted to show human fleet positions, and the council members stared in stunned silence. Hundreds of human vessels were scattered across multiple galactic arms, positioned not at the systems under attack, but at seemingly random points in empty space. I don't understand, Senator Quillnex admitted. Those positions don't protect any strategic assets. They don't block major hyperspace routes. What possible tactical advantage do they provide? They're not defensive positions, Elena explained. They're convergence points. For what? For the Hunters. Every major Hunter fleet movement for the past 40 years has been observed, analyzed, and modeled. We know how they think, how they move, how they prioritize targets. More importantly, we know how they'll retreat when their primary offensive fails. Admiral Zephyra felt her scales shift to colors of growing alarm. You're saying you've planned for their retreat before they've even engaged? We've planned for every possibility, Elena confirmed. The hunter fleet isn't just attacking randomly. They're following a precise operational plan designed to maximize resource acquisition while minimizing their own losses. But operational plans have inherent limitations. The holographic display updated to show projected hunter movement patterns, flowing like a vast river through the galaxy's spiral arms, but overlaid on the projection were human fleet positions, and now their placement began to make terrifying sense. You're creating a funnel, whispered Lord Commander Crixtall. You're channeling the entire hunter fleet into a predetermined path. Correction, Elena said with a slight smile. We're channeling them into a predetermined killing field. The first reports began arriving within hours. Human fleets were engaging hunter formations throughout the Outer Rim, but not in the massive fleet actions that conventional doctrine would suggest. Instead, individual human vessels were conducting precision strikes against specific hunter ships, always targeting the command vessels that coordinated hunter tactics. Surgical removal of command and control nodes, Admiral Zafira observed as she reviewed the battle reports. They're not trying to destroy the entire fleet. They're trying to disrupt hunter coordination. Exactly, Elena confirmed via the ongoing communication link. Remove the command vessels, and hunter fleets devolve into individual ships following basic programming. Individual ships are much easier to manipulate than coordinated fleets. The tactical display showed the effect in real time. As human forces eliminated hunter command ships, the massive invasion fleets began to fragment. Individual hunter vessels, no longer receiving coordinated orders, reverted to basic search and destroy patterns that were far more predictable. It's like cutting the tendons in a giant's hand, Chancellor Vextai observed. The individual fingers are still strong, but they can no longer work together effectively. And individual fingers, Elena added, can be dealt with one at a time. The hunter response was swift but predictable. Deprived of fleet coordination, the individual vessels began seeking targets of opportunity rather than following the original strategic plan. They scattered throughout the galaxy, each pursuing its own tactical objectives, which was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. Phase 2 initiation, Elena announced. All Persistence-class vessels begin systematic hunter elimination. What followed defied every principle of conventional military thinking. Instead of massing their forces for major engagements, the humans dispersed their fleet even further. Individual human vessels began stalking individual hunter ships, using the same patient tactics that had proven so effective in smaller engagements. But now those tactics were being applied on a galactic scale. Impossible, breathed Senator Quillnex as he watched the battle reports flow in. They're coordinating thousands of individual engagements across hundreds of star systems. The computational requirements alone are within human capabilities, Elena finished. We've been preparing for this specific scenario for decades. Every human vessel knows its role, its targets, and its backup objectives. We don't need real-time coordination because we've already calculated every probable outcome. Admiral Zafira watched in fascination as the tactical display showed human vessels appearing throughout the galaxy, each one precisely positioned to intercept hunter ships that were still hours away from their projected positions. It was the same principle they had demonstrated in smaller engagements, but scaled up to encompass entire galactic sectors. You're not just hunting them, she realized. You're herding them, forcing them to move in patterns that serve your objectives. The hunters are apex predators, Elena agreed. But they've been apex predators for so long that they've forgotten how to recognize when they've become prey. The reports continued streaming in, each one more incredible than the last. Human forces were achieving kill ratios that should have been mathematically impossible. Individual human vessels were destroying multiple hunter ships in rapid succession, using kinetic weapons that the ancient machines couldn't defend against. Current engagement statistics, Elena reported with clinical precision. Human forces have eliminated 1,437 hunter vessels. Human casualties: 14 ships with minor damage, 0 total losses. 0 losses? Lord Commander Crixtall's cybernetics sparked with disbelief. Against 3,000 hunter vessels? The hunters are following predictable patterns, Elena explained. When you can predict an enemy's actions with mathematical certainty, casualties become a choice rather than an inevitability. We choose not to sustain casualties. Chancellor Vextai felt his crystalline form resonating with something that might have been awe. Captain Vasquez, how long have you been planning this operation? The basic strategic framework was developed 73 years ago, Elena replied. We've been refining the tactical details ever since. Every hunter engagement, every observed behavior pattern, every tactical innovation has been incorporated into the model. 73 years? Admiral Zafira's voice rose in pitch. But first contact with the hunters was only 60 years ago. For the galaxy, Elena agreed. Humanity encountered our first hunter vessel in 2157. We've been studying them much longer than the galactic community realizes. The implications hit the council members like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just developed effective anti-hunter tactics after joining the galactic community. They had been preparing for this war for nearly a century, developing strategies and technologies specifically designed to counter an enemy that the rest of the galaxy still barely understood. Phase 3 initiation, Elena announced. Beginning hunter fleet reconsolidation. The tactical display showed something that defied comprehension. The scattered hunter vessels, driven by their basic programming to seek efficiency and coordination, were beginning to regroup, but they weren't regrouping randomly. They were being guided, manipulated by carefully positioned human forces into forming exactly the concentrations that human tactical doctrine required. You're making them reorganize according to your specifications, Admiral Zafira whispered. Correct. Individual hunter vessels are dangerous but predictable. Small hunter fleets are manageable with conventional tactics, but large hunter fleets require specialized countermeasures. As the council watched, the remaining hunter vessels were methodically herded into a series of convergence points scattered throughout the galaxy. Each convergence point was surrounded by human forces that had been positioned with mathematical precision. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, Elena said, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. You are about to witness the culmination of humanity's long-game strategy. We call it the Venus Flytrap Protocol. The final phase of the human operation unfolded with mechanical precision. At each convergence point, the regrouped hunter fleets found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had been waiting in perfect ambush positions. But these weren't the individual Persistence-class ships that had been conducting the harassment operations. These were human dreadnoughts. Introducing the Inexorable-class strategic platforms, Elena announced as massive human vessels decloaked throughout the galaxy. Each dreadnought was easily 10 times the size of a Persistence-class ship, bristling with kinetic weapons that could accelerate projectiles to near light speed. The hunter fleets, trapped in carefully prepared killing fields, found themselves facing an enemy that had anticipated not just their individual movements, but their collective response to systematic pressure. The ancient machines, for the first time in millions of years, discovered what it felt like to be the ones caught in a trap. The final battles were swift and decisive. Hunter vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were systematically destroyed by kinetic projectiles fired from positions they couldn't reach, following trajectories they couldn't predict, with timing that turned their own tactics against them. Final engagement statistics, Elena reported as the last hunter vessel was eliminated. Total enemy casualties, 3,007 vessels. Total human casualties, 26 ships with minor damage, 0 total losses. The council chamber fell silent. In less than 2 days, humanity had eliminated the largest hunter fleet in recorded history, without losing a single vessel. They had done so using tactics that turned the enemy's greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. Captain Vasquez, Chancellor Vextai said slowly, what are humanity's intentions regarding ongoing hunter threats? Elena's expression became thoughtful. The hunter race is an existential threat to all organic life in the galaxy. Their elimination has been designated as humanity's primary long-term strategic objective. Elimination? Senator Quillnex leaned forward. You mean to destroy them completely? We mean to hunt them to extinction, Elena confirmed with quiet certainty. They are apex predators that have reached the end of their evolutionary cycle. It's time for a new apex predator to take their place in the galactic ecosystem. Admiral Zafira felt her scales shift to colors she had never experienced before. The humans weren't just defending themselves or their allies. They were systematically, methodically, pursuing the complete annihilation of an enemy that had dominated the galaxy since before recorded history. The long game continues, Elena concluded. Human fleets are already pursuing the scattered hunter remnants. Our deep space monitoring networks will track any surviving vessels. Our strategic analysis suggests complete hunter elimination within 25 years. As the communication link closed, the council members sat in stunned silence. They had called for help in their darkest hour, expecting at best a valiant but ultimately futile gesture from their newest allies. Instead, they had witnessed the emergence of a new galactic superpower, one that didn't just fight wars, but rewrote the fundamental rules of warfare itself. The humans had taken patience, mathematics, and an understanding of predator psychology, then weaponized them into the most devastating military doctrine the galaxy had ever seen. The age of the Void Hunters was ending. The age of humanity had begun, and somewhere in the back of every council member's mind was the same terrifying thought. If humans could do this to the Hunters, what could they do to anyone else who might threaten them? The galaxy had gained powerful protectors, but it had also gained something far more dangerous, an apex predator that thought in terms of centuries and planned for the complete elimination of its enemies. The universe, they realized, was about to become a much safer place for those who called humanity friend, and a much more dangerous place for those who did not.